Good morning everyone and welcome to this week's Sunday video. It is lovely to see you all. Hope you've all had amazing weeks and enjoyed the sunshine. I know it has been amazingly hot where I live, so hope you guys have had some great times as well. If this is your first time joining us this Sunday, it is lovely to see you too. Please do pop up in the chat or go onto the Belmont website or Facebook page and get in contact with us there. We'd love to hear from you and get to know you more. Now, this week we are finishing off our series on Daniel. This is the third week that we've been doing Daniel, and we are very excited to finish it off this week and then move on to something else next week. If you are in the 8 to 11s groups, as per usual, we have got the Zoom call going on for them. So please do drop a message in the chat or again, email us and we will get you onto that Zoom call as fast as we can. We are very happy to get you set up on there if you need to. I'm just going to pray for us quickly and then we will carry on as usual with the normal start of the video and we will get right into that as soon as I pray. Lord, thank you so much for the amazing weather that we've had this week. Thank you that it's been so lovely and warm and that we've been able to have great times enjoying ourselves. Please help us to learn from what Daniel went through so that we can live our lives better for you. Amen. Enjoy the video.
Jesus, number one, right at the top where he belongs. Who he is and what he's done make Jesus number one. Jesus, number one, right at the top where he belongs. Who he is and what he's done make Jesus number one. He's the Son of God, Jesus number one, yeah. He rose from the dead, Jesus number one, yeah. He ruled eternally, Jesus number one, yeah. He has supremacy, Jesus number one. Come on, Jesus number one, right at the top where he belongs. Who he is and what he's done make Jesus number one. Jesus number one, right at the top where he belongs. Who he is and what he's done make Jesus number one. He's the Son of God, Jesus number one, yeah. He rose from the dead, Jesus number one, yeah. He ruled eternally, Jesus number one, yeah. He has supremacy, Jesus number one. Come on, Jesus number one, right at the top where he belongs. Who he is and what he's done make Jesus number one. Jesus number one, right at the top where he belongs. Who he is and what he's done make Jesus number one. Jesus number one, Jesus number one, Jesus number one, Jesus number one, yeah. Woo!
Things were not looking good for God's people. They had been captured and taken far from home, and now they were slaves of the king of Babylon. But God had not left his people. Daniel loved God and obeyed him. Now God made Daniel able to understand lots of difficult things, so it wasn't long before the king of Babylon noticed him. King Darius liked how clever Daniel was, so he made Daniel his most important helper of all and put him in charge of lots of other helpers. But the other helpers didn't like this. They wanted the king to like them best. They wanted to get rid of Daniel, so they spied on Daniel. They tried to find things wrong with Daniel, things they could tell the king, but there weren't any, none. They couldn't find anything at all, except there was just one thing. Every day, 3 times a day, without fail, no matter what, Daniel went to his room, closed the door and prayed. They smiled to themselves, let's get the king to make a law. No one is allowed to pray to anyone except to the king. Daniel won't obey this law. He will be punished. They were pleased with themselves for being so clever. They hurried off to tell the king. The king liked their idea. He didn't know they were tricking him, so he made it into a law. Everyone must pray only to me. If you don't, the lions will have you for their dinner. Daniel heard this. He knew it was wrong to pray to anyone except God. He had to do what God said, whatever it cost him, even if it meant he would die. So Daniel went to his room, closed the door, and prayed. That's just what the bad men knew Daniel would do. They skipped straight off to tell the king. Oh, your most glittering highness, your law says, does it not, that everyone must pray to you alone, sire? Yes, said the king, O magisterial brightness, then correct us if we're wrong. But it would seem that Daniel is praying to God, not to you. The king was sad. He had been tricked. He didn't want to hurt Daniel, but he couldn't change his law, and so he let the soldiers throw Daniel to the lions. May your God, who loved you so much, rescue you, the king said. The king went back to his palace, but he didn't sleep that night, not a wink. He tossed and turned until finally, at the first glimmer of dawn, he leapt out of bed and ran straight to the den. Daniel, he cried, has your God rescued you? Yes, Daniel shouted. God sent an angel to close the lions' mouths. And there, resting his head on Daniel's lap, was the biggest lion, purring like a little kitten. The king had brought Daniel out of the den. Look, he said, Daniel doesn't even have a scratch. The king made a new law. Daniel's God is the true God, the God who rescues. Pray to him instead.
Hello everyone, it's Lottie. So, today we're thinking of Daniel in the lion's den, which we can find in our Bibles in Daniel 6. So if you have them open already, please do keep them open as we think about what Daniel 6 says. So let's think about it. Last week we were looking at the story of Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego in the fire, and God protected them. Now this story happens a few years later, and so now there's a new king. Instead of King Nebuchadnezzar, there is a king called Darius. And Daniel is one of the very important people now in Babylon. So there's King Darius, and then there are 3 people under him who are also in charge of Babylon. And Daniel is one of those 3 people. So he wasn't a Babylonian. Do we remember that from a couple of weeks ago? He wasn't a Babylonian. And so people who were Babylonians were very jealous of Daniel, that he had risen up the ranks and was super important, even though he wasn't a Babylonian himself. So there were a few who decided that they didn't want him to be that important. So they went to King Darius and said, we need to change this. We have a great idea. If you make a law that says everyone has to pray to you and worship you as if you were God, and anyone who doesn't will have to be thrown into the lion's den. So these people were tricking Darius, because Darius really liked Daniel because he was a hard worker. And so he didn't know anything about these plans, but he just thought it was a great idea for people to worship him, because he loved power and wanted to be super powerful and almost viewed himself as God. So he wanted everyone else to view him as God too. But Daniel, as we know, loved God and knew that the only person that you could worship to and pray to was God himself. You couldn't worship someone else. That's a bit silly, isn't it? But the people in Babylon all worshipped and prayed to King Darius instead. But Daniel carried on being faithful to God, even with this threat that he might be thrown into the lion's den. He was faithful and prayed to God 3 times a day, every single day. And so the people knew that Daniel would do this. So they went to Darius after they'd found Daniel praying and said, Darius, look what Daniel is doing. That's not okay, is it? He needs to be thrown into the lion's den because that's the law that you made. Darius was very upset by this, and he didn't want to throw his hard-working person into the lion's den. But he had to because he'd made this law. So he threw Daniel into the lion's den. These lions were probably really, really hungry. They probably weren't fed very much. And so they should have gobbled him up straight away. But what's amazing and miraculous is they didn't. Daniel got left there for a whole night. And yet when Darius came the next morning, he was still alive and completely well, and the lions hadn't touched him at all. Now this surely was a miracle from God, because God saw how faithful Daniel was to him, that he was faithful back. Even when people were trying to trip him up, Daniel was still faithful. So Daniel had a faith that was even stronger than a law that would mean that he was going to be killed if he didn't follow it. And he was faithful even when people were trying to trip him up and trying to make him lose his faith. He was still faithful to God. Now, what does that mean for us? Are there times that it's similar for us? Now, I have never been told that I'll be thrown into lions if I had carried on believing in God. And I don't think any of you will have either. But I think there are quite often times when it does feel like people don't want us to believe in God and to be faithful to him. So there are some times when people aren't very kind to us or think that what we believe is a bit silly and a bit stupid, and we might feel a bit stupid ourselves for believing in God instead of what everyone else thinks and believes is right. Can we think of those times now? Can we think of times when we are maybe at school and people have picked on us or thought that what we said was a little bit silly and we didn't feel very clever or didn't feel like what we were believing was right? But then what's amazing is God is still faithful, isn't he? He has promised to look after us. So are there times when we can remember God's faithfulness to us as well? So let's think about those 2 questions and chat about those with our families now. So when has God been faithful to us? But when has it also been difficult to be a Christian? So God never promised that it will be completely easy, did he? He said that it would be difficult sometimes to be a Christian, but yet he is still faithful to us and promises us that there is heaven to come for those who believe in him. And so even though sometimes it can be really difficult to be a Christian, and for some people it's really, really difficult, like Daniel, and some people are persecuted, which means that they get thrown into prison or even threatened to be killed. So there's a place called Yemen where people are being killed for believing in Jesus, and yet they still cling to him. So can we do that in our weeks? So these are my 3 questions to think about. When do we find it difficult to be a Christian? But when is God faithful to us? And when can we be faithful to God this week especially? And let's discuss that with our families now.
Jesus said that Hello everybody, it's Sarah here today, and I am going to be telling you how to do a lion craft. We've just heard that amazing story, haven't we, of Daniel in the lion's den and how God stopped the mouth of the lion from opening and kept Daniel safe when he was in the lion's den because Daniel trusted God. Daniel wasn't scared to pray to God because he knew it was the right thing to do. And I'm sure that when he was in that lion's den, he was praying as well. So we are going to make a lion, and it's a lion that's got a mouth that you can open and shut. Here it is. Rah. And this lion has got a secret inside because it's got some amazing verses hidden inside that tell us just how amazing God is and that we don't need to worry when we're in scary situations because God is always with us. So in order to make this lion, you will need the printout that hopefully Mum or Dad has printed out for you. You'll need some lion coloured colouring pens or pencils, and you'll need a pair of scissors, and that's all we're going to need today. So the first thing we need to do is colour in our lion, so each part of his face here in our lion colours, and also we've got to colour in the mouth, so these spiky bits here that are next to the face, up here and down here, they're the teeth, so we'll keep those white, and then these parts here we can colour in red, that's the inside of his mouth. And you can also colour in the numbers if you want to. So that's the first thing we've got to do, is colour in our sheets. And then when you've finished your colouring, it should look something like that. So you've coloured each part of the lion's face and then also his inside of his red mouth, and you've left these teeth at the top and at the bottom nice and white. And then we can cut it out. We just need to cut out round the square. So I'm going to do that now. So once you've got it all coloured in, it's time to fold it. So I'm just going to tip my camera down here. So we just need to put it on it flat on its front, fold it in half, and then in half again to get some creases so we can see where the middle is. And then I'm going to fold each corner into the middle so that you've got all of your lion's faces there, but they're all jumbled up at the moment. Then we're going to flip it over and do the same thing, put all the points into the middle, turn it over, it's still got a jumbled up lion face, and then we're going to fold it in half like that, and then we can open up, we can stick our fingers in there, and then suddenly our lion has come to life. And his face is in the right place, his mouth opens with a roar. So now you're all done and you've got your lion. You can open his mouth and you could play a game with somebody else in your family and you can get them to choose a number. I'm going to choose number 1, and you can see what verse is there. It says, "Be strong in the Lord and in his great power." That's from Ephesians chapter 6 verse 10, and that's exactly what Daniel was, wasn't he? He was strong in the Lord, and God's great power helped him in the lion's den when God shut the mouths of the lion, just like we can shut the mouth of our lion to remind us just how powerful God is. So I hope you enjoyed making this craft. Please do put your pictures of your lions on our Young Families Facebook page. We'd love to see how you get on with that. And also you could share one of your favourite verses from Inside the Lion as well. Bye for now. I'll see you again soon.
Well, that is all for this week, and that is all from our Daniel series as well. I hope that you guys have learned lots and enjoyed yourselves doing all the different crafts that we've had going on. Please do feel free to send us pictures of your crafts on Facebook or by email, as well as any prayer requests or any sort of further discussion topics that you'd maybe like to talk about on there too. We're very happy to hear from you all. Now, next week we will be doing something different, seeing as this is the last week on Daniel. So please do keep an eye on your emails and we will keep you up to date with what we have planned. It's been lovely for you all to join us this week, and we hope that you have amazing weeks. And again, we pray that there will be great weather again in the coming days. Nice to see you. Goodbye.